Thank you.
So thank you very much and welcome you all on behalf of IPA for this knowledge session. Uh, we keep on saying every time that it is the greatest moment for all of us in the pharma industry. And as rightly put by our Prime Minister, that pharma industry is not only the asset of India, but for the world. Uh, this film, what you saw, recognized the contribution of all of you who are playing a very important role to make sure that there is uninterrupted supply of quality medicines, not only in India but around the world. Just before the call, we were having meeting with Medicine for Europe, and a great recognition by all of them that despite the stringent lockout in India, we have been able to meet the requirement of medicine. So one job which Srish and all of us had is work with all of you to make sure that the regulations help. And I would like to thank the leadership of IPA that we were made the essential industry. All of us work together to make sure that there are no interruptions and the supply take place. Second, we said that quality standards will be followed. So a lot of work has gone by that you have been able to maintain the quality standards despite all stringent lockout. And the BCG had been working with us on future of work. So they did the work on commercial organization, manufacturing organization, quality organization, and also now the corporate organization. So, and the SAP and BCG have come together that whatever has been talked on quality, how do you happen it on the ground? And that is the outcome of this knowledge session, that how do we make it implementing on the ground. So IPA Quality Forum Group started this seminar. We have been having a series of seminar, a great response by all of you in attending this seminar, and very valuable feedback because you are finding it valuable in terms of execution on the ground, on the facilities. So today's session is on quality, and we have got great advantage of Sebastian, who is joining us from Germany, and Vikas, who will be conducting this session, and Rajesh, who has been playing a very important role. So thank you very much and welcome you for this. Welcome to you all participants, and thank you to Shirish for leading this initiative on behalf of IPA. With this, I wish you all the very best, very great learning in this seminar, and I hand it over to Shirish. Over to you, Shirish.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sudarshan ji. Good evening to all of you. I think this is the second in the series which we are worked with the SAP people on the quality of the future. I think future of the manufacturing or quality or the corporate or the commercial. So this is second in the series. We started with the manufacturing last time, and this is the second in the series. And I think most of the faces or names what I'm seeing, they attended last session too. So actually it doesn't require another introduction again. But let me introduce the Rajesh, who is Rajesh Kuppuswamy is the life sciences and healthcare industry leader in SAP India and the life sciences community hub leader in the SAP Asia Pacific Japan region. In this role, Rajesh is responsible for leading strategic client engagements and enabling transformation initiative across the enterprise. He has more than 22 years of experience in the life sciences spread between industry and consulting. He is a qualified pharmacist with a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences from the University of Maryland, Baltimore. I think we have got great line of the speakers today, Vivek Gira and Sebastian Konchinke, I think. I hope I pronouncing them well. Rajesh, I will request Rajesh to introduce the speakers and start the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudarshan ji. Thank you, Shirish ji. It is indeed a great pleasure to be part of this forum and to reach out to the industry with solutions which we believe are fit for purpose. If you remember, for those who attended the attended the last session, we started off essentially saying how important it is to look at data and how we looked at different systems. We talked about systems of record, we talked about systems of differentiation, we talked about systems of innovation. Now, that was all about how and where data gets stored. So today's session, what we are going to do is actually talk about what do we do with this data, what kind of a strategy should we have around this data, and how it can impact quality. With that introduction, I will then pass on to our partners. We have Sebastian from Orsoft, who is joining us from Germany. We have Vivek, who is the CEO of Lucene Tech. He will talk about how these principles are essentially used to make QA more uh, not just productive, but a lot proactive, more to say than productive, I would say more proactive, so as the serviceability is not hampered. What we saw in the video at the beginning and what Sudarshanji acknowledged about how the industry is able to ensure serviceability is not dropped and how we are getting kudos from across the world for that. So how can the quality functions contribute towards that? Then we are essentially following the script of what was done as part of the future of work. And one of the key components that was included in the original study that was done by BCG had a portion on so what is the organization going to look like going forward? How they need to be enabled to ensure that whatever we talk about as capabilities in QC and QA, how that is delivered. And then we will do a wrap up. We will take questions on the chat window. I will keep monitoring the chat window. And if there are relevant questions which can be inserted while the speakers are going through their content, I will insert that. I will get in and I'll mention the question at that time. Else, what I will do is I will keep these questions to the end. We'll probably have about 35 minutes for each of the speakers, and then for QC and QA, maybe about 15 to 20 minutes for org of the future. This will leave us enough time for us to do the Q&A at the end. So before I hand it off to QC, just a quick point of view from SAP on how we look at data and data strategy. So this whole data strategy can be broken into three components. One is the data business strategy, one is the operational strategy, and one is the technical strategy. A lot of what has already come out in BCG study, which was shared with the industry, probably dealt with business strategy. Some of what we will look at today will touch upon operational strategy and technical strategy. And I don't need to go through the content on the slide, but the whole idea is to ensure that the foundation is firm, which comes through the operational strategy. And then the technical strategy is the execution of the technical components so that whatever was envisaged as part of the business strategy is in fact enabled. Towards this, we have a very deliberate process as to how to ensure that this is realized the way it is supposed to be. Uh, I know different organizations are at different levels of maturity and at different milestones as part of this journey. Depending on who we engage with and what their current needs are, as well as where they are at the given time, we are able to pick it up from there. But a lot of focus essentially I want to lay is on the pieces around data strategy workshops and data value workshops. Eventually what gets constructed towards the end is the data architecture roadmap, which we'll not talk about a lot today. But this whole thing around data strategy will essentially define how we look at each function, how we look at the contribution from each function, and how we look at what that function really means to the overall organization and how it contributes to the vision of the organization. So this is a very granular level slide in terms of the process that one goes through. But the whole idea is one needs to start somewhere and there is no boundaries or limits as to where one can start. So the data strategy concept, the way I envision may be very different from what someone else does. And maybe if there are 40, 50, 80 people on the call right now, whatever, there may be some as many number of ideas or even more. However, that needs to be ultimately funneled and it needs to be aligned with essentially what the different functions within an organization, the different business units within the organization are really interested to deliver. And then it comes down to a little more granular level as part of use cases. then a lot of interactions happen through which prioritizations are made. And then, of course, the solutioning and value proposition happens. So what you will see today when Sebastian and Vivek talk about QC and QA respectively, they have gone through this process in some shape or form or the other. And they have really brought out some key problems that the industry face and how they have solved and what kind of value they've added. Now, in a 2-hour session, we will not be able to cover every single aspect of QC and QA needs. Nevertheless, we will touch upon some key ones. We will take your questions. And of course, sometime by end of next week, we will share all this content with the participants. And you also have a way of reaching back to us in terms of how you want to discuss next steps based on your particular needs. Once we have heard from Sebastian and Vivek, we will take some time, and Sudakshana will present that part. She is an industry leader across multiple industries, helping with digital transformation with many of SAP's clients. She will now link this whole data strategy concept as to how it is applicable to people, how it is applicable to organizations, and how it is essentially helping empowering people to do their jobs better. For those who attended the last session, we spoke briefly about systems of differentiation and systems of innovation. But then you can have all the systems you want, but not everyone is really qualified to use many of these, and they depend on IT to generate reports and whatnot. How you can make people more self-reliant so that they're able to play around with the available data and come up with new ways of working. So that is the flow for today. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to request Vivek to come on. I'm sorry, Sebastian to come on and start with the session on quality control. Over to you, Sebastian.
Thank you very much, Rajesh. I just have to find the right screen to share. Just let me know if you see the slides. Might be the wrong.
Yeah, you're visible. No, we can see the slides. You can go ahead.
You see the slides, perfect. Okay, and then I will also like to share myself as well. So during talk, you at least see me. Okay, thank you very much, Rajesh, for the nice introduction, and to everybody else as well. I'm happy today to talk to you for about 35 minutes about my view, our view as Allsoft on the strategy laid out by the Boston Consulting Group. And without further ado, I just want to lead you through a few slides, which I have prepared and we're happy to share with you later on, of course, as well. So first, little summary and maybe a heads up of what I want to talk about. There are two main topics I will touch today. One is customer stories. So I think for you all, it's really interesting how the levels that you've seen already and that BCG shared with you really fit in my experience, in our experience as Allsoft, with what we see at customer side and what are the challenges we were facing during our work in the pharma business. And the second part is something I want to shed light on, that is laboratory planning. So planning ahead of the tasks that need to be done. That's something Allsoft has also really elaborate in for the last 30 years. There was lab planning and also production planning. So at the end, we will also talk about a little how these two come together. Okay, just to give you an overview. But now let's focus on customer challenges and how they fit into the 4 levels and how I view them, at least in these 4 levels. And I'm of course happy on your insights on them, and maybe you see that differently, then please let me know. Customer stories. So I want to share 3 customer stories with you. The first one is about a pharma company, revenue of about 650 million euros, that had a huge backlog in their laboratory work. And that was also in part coming from very slow sample preparation. That wasn't the only problem. We will see later, where they also had some challenges to face, but there was one of it I want to focus on as well. The same company of the same size, roughly the same size, they did not consider the laboratory availability, the QC availability, when they were accepting big orders. So that means they asked production, but they didn't really consider lab as a full part of the supply chain. And the third example I want to give you is a pharma company quite bigger than the other two, that needed or needs to integrate. The process is ongoing. A new department, actually in France, they purchased last year into their existing business. So that's also, of course, an ongoing process. Nevertheless, I think there are key learnings from that as well. So these are the three challenges I want to talk to you about, and about my experience with them and what I think we can learn from it. Good. So let's go through it. The first one is the company that had a huge backlog, and that was coming from, in part, from slow sample preparation. So what is the status? What was the status when we arrived with them? So obviously with all three companies we were working with, and when we were working with this one, what we found is that the quality control had no awareness of their backlog status. They knew there were a lot of tests in backlog, tests they had that needed to be done, they haven't done, but they were so overwhelmed by work, so they didn't know how to go on from there. And the second problem was that the sample location wasn't clear to them, and that really fits the last 2 points I mentioned here. So the production was prioritizing their batches on a very short notice. So that meant that they might get a call in the afternoon that they have to finish some tests they haven't even begun by that day. So then, first off, they had to reorganize everything. That was a really short notice, so that's not effective at all. And secondly, they didn't know where the samples were located. So someone had to go there, search for the sample, prepare the sample on this very short notice under this pressure. So that was the big issues they were facing at that time. So now let's see how these challenges really fit into the 4 levels laid out by BCG. And as you see, I've used the same layout. So most of the credit of this, of course, goes to BCG, especially for the first and the third column. And what I try to do is I try to see how the challenges I've described fit into this whole picture here. So what we're talking about, I will go just from level 1 to level 4. What we're talking about on level 1, so integrating basic technology systems, what they needed to do and what they already had started to doing was they needed to integrate an ERP system for info transfer, especially with production, but also for themselves, of course. And they were looking for an integrated LIMS system for visibility. As I've said, they had problems. They didn't even know their backlog. And rapid sample identification is also something that I think fits quite well at this level. What I would match to the second level is auto sample preparation. So here, I'm not mentioning everything that might be possible in this with this background, but what I think really fits the challenge and fits the levels that were laid out by BCG. So auto sample preparation might be something for level 2. On level 3, we're talking personalized work instructions and work lists to analysts, providing live work lists to analysts. So that would really tackle, first off, if you're having live work list of what you have to do for the next minutes, hours, days, then this might change, but everything is communicated right away. And then if the work instructions are altered in the same way, then there's no confusion really going on. So, and if sample preparation on top of that is also done automatically, then this would really help this company. And on level 4, okay, we're talking online testing. That would, of course, basically get rid of the whole problems they were facing. That's how I see in the view of this challenge, what BCG has laid out. So what's the current status and what's the journey this customer is going on? And just remember what I've talked about before, what I think is really important for these 4 levels. So if we're looking at where they are right now, that is, they already had it established when we arrived an ERP system, actually SAP ERP. They were with us, they were improving on the integrated LIMS system, that was SAP QM in this case. Improving means they were putting data in there because sometimes they didn't even have the data in there that would help them to really properly do their tests, to really properly know what to do. What also really improved is QC and production are on the journey towards aligning their processes and talking to each other. I think that's also one of the key learnings. We will come to this in a second. What I think is really important, that people talk to each other and people understand their needs of different departments, understand their needs, and they understand their processes. So because otherwise they are not able to align, to work together to be more effective. Installation of a lab planning tool for visibility is ongoing. So that's something we are working on with them right now, because the first step of a lab planning, although it's called lab planning, is always making sure there's visibility over the whole laboratory process or QC process. Okay. Key learnings from that. I think I might have touched most of them already. Nevertheless, let's go through them. One thing rediscovered, and that will be important later down the road as well, that QC, in my experience, needs heavy guidance in this transformation process. And that's not only by itself, which somehow might just be obvious, yeah, because it's really big changes that are laid out in the 4 levels, but it's also in comparison to my experience, my personal experience, and our experiences also in production. So there really is some difference. In my experience in production, people are more used to leveraging tools, using tools to do, for example, their planning process to support what they are doing. In QC, sometimes the mindset didn't get as far. I have to say that's from a European standpoint. So the companies I'm talking about are European pharma companies. Sample preparation inherits big room for improvement. I mean, from the story I told you, that's, I think, quite obvious, yeah. So there is room there, and that's really low-hanging fruit, so to say, yeah, because it can be easily improved and it will benefit very much. And fast and effective communication with production and with all adjacent departments is really essential and should be the basic groundwork, so to say, for everything. Okay, so that's the first. 2 more. Interesting. So the second one is actually completely different from the first one because the challenges they are facing are different. What they had, and that's an interesting story to share with you guys, what they had is they, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they were asked if they can produce another 50 batches, I think it was, certain substance over the next 2 or 3 years. So what they did is, of course, they have a process to check if that's possible. So they checked, but they really forgot QC. So they checked with production. They made sure that their suppliers could supply whatever they needed, but they forgot to check also with QC. And the tests that were behind production of these 50 batches were really with high, and very specific with a high potential to delay the production process. A lot of effort. So what in fact they ended up with, they agreed, and then by contract reasons, they had to produce these 50, or they had to produce these 50 batches. They had to hire new staff on short notice, new machines on new notice, basically create a new lab on short notice, which was really costly. That could have been avoided if they had looked ahead in time. And what this is also part of is QC is not part of the demand planning process. So that's basically the essential of what I just described. So that was the triggering point for them when they said, hey, we really need to go forward in this area. We need to do something. So what's fitting here is on level 1, again, let's go through the 4 levels. The ERP for info transfer with production is something that's really important because they really want to focus on talking to production and making sure that everything is aligned, especially basically on all levels. And they needed to integrate a LIMS and a lab planning tool for visibility because, I mean, they can talk as much as they want to production if they can tell them what their capacity is. If they can tell them what the processes are, if they can't talk in detail about numbers, then that doesn't help. So that's something that really needs to be established and needed to be established on level 1. And level 2 and 3 is basically focusing on improving this workflow, improving the throughput. Yeah? And that is, in my opinion, exactly what really fits well to the level 2 and 3 that were mentioned, what is mentioned there by the Boston Consulting Group. Yeah, something like auto sample preparation, optimized workflows, personalized work instructions. Because remember, they really had trouble with these heavy workload tests. Yeah? So everything they can improve there really helps. And eventually the vision would be that on level 4, these heavy workload tests are not necessary anymore. They don't need to be done. So there is not even any need to consult QC when talking about how much can be produced, because QC is so fast and so integrated into the process that they do not influence the release process. Okay. Again, journey and current status. What's the journey? An ERP system was already in place. That's also SAP in this case. The customer really improved on their master data regarding the LIMS system, SAP QM in this case. So they really put in the data that is needed to improve on the communication process. For instance, they put in their expected time for each test into the system. QC and production really with us, with our help, started talking to each other. And they, I think, are now communicating way more effectively. Yeah? So both sides really got together and started understanding what is necessary for each other to really work well. The installation of the lab planning tool is finished with them. So they have the visibility now based on, of course, the data they see. And the integration of QC and production is ongoing. It's not only the level of management, yeah, so making sure the processes are correct, but it's also on a software level, making sure that these two parts grow together and that they are working on the same data and that they share the right information at the right time. Key learnings from that. The first one is the same, but I want to stretch it. Yeah, the transformation process isn't easy. It took time. And when we arrived there, we figured that there was, in this area, there was really not much basics. So that was something we had to talk to them. We had to find out what the processes are, which sometimes weren't even apparent to the people working in the labs. Then the second one is, from my experience, it's always production influences QC. Production tells QC basically what they need to do and when it needs to be done. But with software, because QC can also be enabled to influence the supply chain and to influence production. Yeah, not as heavy as maybe it's working the other way around, but they can at least tell them what they can do, what they can't do, improve in the processes, improve communication. And master data is very important, and that's especially at the start of the journey. Yeah? Without master data, correct and fully master data, it's always, or I should say it differently, master data should always be one of the basics that should be done at the start of a level 1. That's my experience. Okay, just let me drink something real quick. The third one. Third company, quite bigger, working all over the globe, basically. But they are located in, the headquarters located in Germany. They acquired a new department, basically, with a few labs. And they are now working on the process of integrating these new labs into the whole process. And that's on different levels. Yeah, the first one is IT landscape. Of course, on an IT level, everything needs to be, at least that's what they're aiming for, needs to be integrated. And the second one is the process level. Yeah. Also on the process level, where can you really use synergies? How can you work together? So that's what they're working on with us and other companies, of course, because it's obviously a huge process. But for QC and production planning, they're working with us on that. Okay. How does this fit into the 4 levels again? What I would like to do in this here is to focus in level 1, and this will be on the next 2 slides as well, is what they do and what fits level 1 very well. And it's also part of the journey to level 2, 3, and 4 is to synchronize data. And for them, that means, for this company, that means one ERP system for info transfer and one LIMS, and preferably one LIMS for all locations, one LIMS with a unified database. Because if the data isn't synchronized, then we are talking either way, we're talking about interfaces all over the place, or are we talking about not synchronized processes, not synchronized data, no data exchange, at least not on an IT level. And as soon as these ground roots are laid out, and I will show you where they are right now on that, the next steps are, for instance, something one can utilize beneath everything else that was already on the other slides and that you all know, is something like cross-lab testing, for instance. An idea would be automation. Takes time, but maybe some labs go ahead and they have a higher level of automation. So some processes, some of the tests could already be transferred to one of the already or to the labs with automation already. But for this, of course, it needs to be visible where tests can be done, where they need to be moved, and this should be done in an easy and integrated way. And then level 3, empower information sharing. Yeah, that's something I also want to stretch. And augmented reality for me is really a nice way to go ahead for that, because, for instance, training would be really nice, especially right now in like the COVID crisis we are facing right now, where people can't travel, they can't really work together at the same place. But if they are able to show what they are doing and share with each other, and that even over boundaries, yeah, over country boundaries and any other boundaries that might lay ahead, then this really helps, in my opinion. And the vision for that is one unified system and process through all departments that I think really fits well this eliminate QC lab for production release approach. Okay, so what's the journey they are currently on and what's the current status? What they have done is they have already established a unified ERP system. So there will be SAP S/4HANA actually enrolled for all the systems. Half of them, all the locations, half of them already have the new SAP system. The other half will get it over the next 2 or 3 years. So that obviously takes some time. What they are also working on is a LIMS system, globalized LIMS system for everybody. And the approach to that is that the SAP S/4HANA, the ERP system, serves as a unified database for the LIMS. So this LIMS is not SAP QM, something I need to stretch. It's an external LIMS. Nevertheless, the idea is to really use SAP S/4HANA as the common database for all QC activities, at least for the basic master data and the basic transactional data. I will come to this in a few minutes again. Then the integration of integrated lab planning tool. Yeah, if you have your LIMS, if you have talking about execution, you also have to talk about what to execute. So about when to execute, what to execute. So that's lab planning. This is how we also came into this integration process. And integration of QC in production is actually ongoing. It's not, they didn't get too far, but it is in scope. And they are aware that that's something they need to tackle. And here, I want to focus on one of the aspects I mentioned, and that is utilize the ERP system as a unified data storage. So for them, I'm not saying this is working for everybody, but for this company, globalized company with a globalized IT and a globalized approach to their IT standards, this is for them the way to go. And the reasons for them and for us to go that way, to have a unified data storage regarding LIMS, regarding QC, and regarding production, regarding finance, regarding all of these different departments, I've listed here. Yeah, one of them is use standard functionalities to full extent. I mean, the ERP already delivers a lot of standard functionalities that are already there. If you're going for an external database for LIMS, if you're going for an external database for lab planning, if you're going for external databases, then it's really hard to integrate all these processes, to integrate into finance, to integrate into business warehouse and things like that. Then the second one that I shouldn't be underestimated is to communicate in a common language, because we all, I mean, people know that's different. People think to know what a material is, but actually that's different depending on the system, on the ERP system, on the LIMS system, on the planning system. But if you're using one common database, which for instance might be the ERP, then it's clear what a material is. The material is what is defined in the ERP system. And this makes it way easier for different departments to come together on a process level but also, of course, on a technical level. The third one is fully utilized process synergies. So something that came to mind is, for example, QC and plant maintenance. They really have to work in synchronize, but usually plant maintenance is working with the ERP system, S/4HANA in this case, but QC might not. In this case, it's an external LIMS. So how do you integrate these processes if they are not integrated on a data level? Single source of truth, I think, is self-explanatory, and it simplifies the integration and switch of subsystems, because you have one key database and subsystems integrate into this key database, the lab planning, the LIMS system, production planning, and so on and so forth. And in this background, it makes easy to take out one of these and put in something that maybe fits your strategy better. So that were the key reasons for this company to go that way. Okay, short summary, really quick. What I've seen with customers is level 1 has mostly been achieved. Sometimes it's work in progress, but what I've talked about was mostly, the summary for each of the 3 challenges was, yes, they are working on their data integration, they are working on their IT landscape, and they do have an ERP system, they do have a LIMS system, and so on and so forth. Level 2 and 3, it gets quite hard in my experience with other customers. That's something they have in scope that they might want to tackle, but that might be only really, let's say, convertible for specific issues. So for example, sample preparation. For sample preparation might be helpful for the one challenge where they had problems with that to do some automation on this part. Or if we're talking QC integration, something like this. Or if we're talking automation of some heavy workload processes, or if we're talking augmented reality for communicating better over boundaries, that's something they might tackle. That's my feeling. That's what I've drawn from talking with them. What they are not considering right now, that's my experience, is to go the full way for level 2 and 3. Might change over time. Right now they don't. And level 4 is currently not considered. I think that is kind of, at least on let's say, for the IT guys, that is not in their scope. It's more like a vision. Something I also want to share with you is some insights on what I think the level transfer really would get some benefit. That we've seen, the level 1 really leads to less efforts for alignment and risk reduction. That's something we can get from that. If you're going from level 1 to level 2, this automation minimizes errors, of course. It reduces the effort for the simple tasks, the repetitive tasks. It reduces complexity, and you can utilize synergies by that already. That's something I've talked about. Level 2 to 3 is full enablement of analysts' potential. So this digital twin really leads to higher flexibility and to higher throughput, basically. And level 4 is, of course, cost optimal through full integrated processes, to get everything first time right. There are basically 2 approaches to that. One is to have fully integrated process, to have QC fully integrated, so do online tests. The other one is first time right, not even that you don't need to do tests anymore. So for me, these 4 levels, the way I understand these 4 levels is basic technology, then try to tackle the low-hanging fruits, try to get what was easy to tackle, then enable the analyst's full potential, tackle the hard cases, so to say, the hard tests, and then on the next level, just eliminate QC. That's there already in the description of the level. Good. So that's about the first part. Now I've got about 5 to 10 minutes, I think. 10 minutes to talk about the second part.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Rajesh, are there already questions or should I go on?
No, I think there is some interest in your next topic already. Asking you to explain a little bit about the planning tool that you have referred a couple of times. So I know that is coming. So yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I will, of course. So the next one is, in our opinion, as Orsoft, how were the roadmap steps? Level 1 to 4 align with lab planning. So that's something, a component I wanted to bring to the table as well, because the 4 levels focus heavily on execution, which I think is really good, because this is where the heavy workload works and where the big room of improvement is. So I really like this. Nevertheless, I want to share with you some insights on the lab planning, and of course, based on my experience with customers and based on my experience with our tool. So just so you remember, this is basically the roadmap for QC laid out by Boston Consulting Group, yeah, for the 4 levels. It's just a different way of looking at it. I will not go through the items because I think we are already aware of them. But what I think is interesting in this part, that there's really a complementary roadmap for lab planning solution. So, and this, okay, first let me go through the items, and then let me explain why I think this is important to consider that as well. So level 1, for me, the key focus areas and the key implementation areas, yeah, should be the complementary lab planning tool. Basically, first step would be for to get an overview, yeah, and the second step would of course be go deeper into planning, really planning inspections on a really detailed level if necessary. What's also important here is the deep integration of planning, lab planning, into the data landscape. That's something I've stretched before. For example, by utilizing the ERP system as the basic data source, to make sure that production data is communicated for lab planning as well. If changes are happening, for instance, to an inspection, of course, they need to be communicated everywhere as well to production and to QC and the other way around. What can already be done in this case is semi-manual planning on collected data, and enable, and that's basically what is enabled by the deep integration into data landscape, is to make sure that planning data can be transferred between production and laboratories. That's important on a data level, but also important on a process level, I think. So that's something I focused on for the first half of this talk. Yeah. It really needs to be integrated on a process level, and then it needs to be integrated on a data level. And when we're talking software here, roadmap, then we're talking data integration. Second level, for me, some items that fit here quite well. Automate the planning in selected areas, automate the QC planning in selected areas, automate the workflow through improved schedules. I will come to this in a second, and integration of production and lab planning in chosen areas. So what I mean by this is, if you want to have automation in certain areas of QC, then of course you need to tell people what they need to do. And there are 2 levels to it. The first one is you need to tell them the steps for a certain test. Do this, do this, do this, do this. That's something. Or maybe you have a machine, then the machine, the robot is doing, needs to know what to do. Do this, 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 do the following steps. But the robot people also need to know which tests to perform. Should I start with test 1 or should I start with test 2? Yeah, and that's something where also a huge room for improvement lays, because sometimes, as you all know, it makes sense, for example, to group certain tests, to utilize machines better. Sometimes people are not available, sometimes machines are not available, and so on. So that's something that's really important in this area. And this goes even further for level 3, because now we are talking about AI, machine learning, creating plans. So creating what to do for the next hours, maybe, or even longer, on the fly, based on live data. Really update your schedule really rapidly to make sure it's always aligned with what production is doing. To make sure it's always aligned with all kinds of departments in your company. This, of course, needs full data integration between lab and production, but also between lab and all the other departments that might influence it. And something I put here, just because it was also discussed in one of the 3 challenges, is integration in demand planning process. At some point that needs to be done as well, but basically it's integration on all levels. Because if you don't know what to do, if you don't know which inspections are next. You cannot tell people, you cannot tell machines what they need to do in detail, which steps they need to do the whole test. And then full automation on level 4, of course, of lab planning. Again, there are two approaches to it. If you eliminate QC because you get everything first time right, then you don't need to automatize, you just get everything right. But if you're saying you really want to integrate QC into your production process by online testing, then again, it might make sense to synchronize production planning and lab planning to make sure that the plan, the schedule you're facing does not only consider production, but it also considers the labs, because sometimes, as for the one example I gave you, there are very heavy workload tests, and they might influence the throughput, and they might influence your delivery times and the supply chain very heavily. So that's something that is important and that needs to be considered in this area. Full integration at this point. So this is my approach. I'm not saying this is giving you the full picture, but what I really want to stretch is the roadmap. The 4 levels are really nice. I really like them. And there is a part to it that is lab planning that should also be considered on your way towards the future. Some pictures about this that really maybe illustrate what I've talked about before. So that is the really basic situation we often see when we arrive at customer sites. That is, there's an ERP system, and on this ERP data, there is production planning going on. Yeah, there's execution, but there's some level and sometimes or often some tools for detailed planning. There's some capacity planning, capacity analysis going on. So basically all levels from really far away to really short time planning is executed in a certain way. Execution is also there. On the LIMS side, there's of course execution, that is what it's for. It's usually missing planning. Maybe there's some really short-term planning going on, where there's nothing that is behind, let's say, doing a schedule for the next day or something. And even then, that's basically just assigning tests to people, yeah, on a daily basis, for instance. I think there's also huge room for improvement. And as you see, actually, there is some gap in between, yeah. And that's what we are trying to fill, and that what is filled with a lab planning tool, yeah. Because why only doing capacity analysis for production? Why not doing it for labs as well? I mean, you do this, I know that you do it, but my experience is it's usually done with Excel. Capacity planning, the same, yeah, to make sure that you're able to execute what production is laying ahead. And detailed planning, the same. And over here, we are talking on level 1, yeah, now we are talking level 1. This is manual, yeah. There's manual planning. People really drag and drop, say, okay, you're doing this, doing that. So there are planners. That's on both sides for ERP and lab planning. There are planners really make sure that the schedule is optimized, maybe a strong word, that there's a good schedule available at least. We're talking level 2, we're talking semi-automation. Semi because it's only automized in some areas, not in all areas. And that is also something that can be looked at from a lab planning perspective, because there are maybe some bottleneck resources, bottleneck work centers, people or teams that are a bottleneck in your overall process. So these areas, they really need to be planned as specific as possible. And there are algorithms supporting you, giving you a good guess on what to do, and then help you to go forward. But there's always people involved at this stage, because people still need to do the final planning. But there are algorithms helping you on your journey. Now we're going detailed planning. That is basically just going further in this way, yeah, to really automatize everything, automatize the planning process, get predictive recommendations, and do this over all levels, yeah, not only for detailed planning, but also for capacity planning. Although I have to point out, of course, for detailed planning, so that's the short time horizon, yeah, today, tomorrow, day after. Detailed planning is more important in this case. For execution, we can also talk about predictive recommendations. And the level 4 for me is real integration of planning into the ERP system. So actually, there is no planning on one side and ERP production on the other side, but they are integrated, they are working together. That is necessary if you want to bring these two processes, QC and production, together in order to do first time right, or in order to do online testing as well. And something I want to stretch here, that's actually my last slide, is what you need on your whole journey. I put it here, but it's basically for all the 4 steps, really important. You need a good interface. I mean, if lab planning and ERP are really one, then you don't interface anymore. But in any other case, you need strong, in my opinion, object-based standard interfaces. I know that there are always interfaces all over the place, but usually they are custom-made. That's my experience. Or they are often custom-made. They are often not live interfaces in any way. Yeah, so they are updating data maybe once. But the more rapid you want to change your schedule, the more automation you want to put in, the stronger your interface need to be, because otherwise it cannot keep up with the rapid change of data and the amount of updated data that is needed to approach your journey to level 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's something I want to stretch. Okay, took me a little longer, I think. So if I got an overtime, sorry for that, but that's basically the message I wanted to bring. Thank you.
Hey, Sebastian, thank you so much. Appreciate your insights. I do urge people to type in questions if they have on the chat window. To the extent of what was sent to me, I did pose that to Sebastian, especially they were interested in understanding what is this lab planning tool, how does it work? So you did lead us through the different levels of maturity of the lab planning tool in terms of how one can adopt. And this very well fits into what we spoke at the beginning, where there is a business strategy and there is a data strategy around that. So first, how do you even envisage planning for the labs? And then eventually, once you start getting into it, that's your operational piece. And then, of course, the technical piece is to what extent of maturity you want to go into and how and what are the kind of data models and some of the technical stuff that you mentioned, including object-based standard interface, etc., become relevant here.
Thank you. And one thing I want to, sorry? Yeah, one thing I want to add, of course, I didn't talk, we are talking about lab planning in a general setting. Of course, there's also more yeah, I can also talk more in detail about the tool if you like, not today, of course, but feel free to contact Rajesh on this purpose.
Sure. While you are still on, Sebastian, maybe one question, can machine learning be adopted? Is there an opportunity for machine learning to have a role in this whole road mapping that you showed for lab planning?
Yes, for sure there is. I can't talk too much about the details because this is on our roadmap, but it's not on our short-term roadmap. But if some of you are interested in more detail about this, we are currently working on a strategy to incorporate machine learning into this whole picture. Yeah, because this rapid changes and the amount of data somehow we have to be cope with.
Okay, great. So thanks, Sebastian. Appreciate sharing your experience with clients as well as the whole concept of lab planning. Vivek, if you can start.
Yeah, so I'll just share my screen. Just let me know when you can see it.
Sure. Yes, Vivek, you're visible. Your screen is visible.
All right. Thank you, Rajesh. And thank you, Sebastian, for your really wonderful insight on a really critical but often overlooked piece called lab planning. But more than that, thanks a lot for not overrunning your time and just leaving half an hour for me. So we'll jump into it. So today, the agenda for my session would be to talk really about quality assurance piece. So just my introduction, my name is Vivek Gera. I'm the CEO of Lucene. And I've spent a lot of time in my career looking at the areas in manufacturing automation and specifically in the areas of regulated manufacturing like pharmaceutical industry. From education point of view, I'm a chemical engineer. I did my graduation from IIT Kanpur. Yeah. So just to give you an idea of what we are going to discuss today. So upfront, we would look at really, what is broken. So if I talk about the future of the quality assurance, we have to understand certain areas that really need attention. So we would look through them. Once we have that context, we would look at the systems of innovation that we can put together for quality assurance. And here you would be able to relate a lot with the previous session that might have been done by BCG. And finally, we would bring all of this together and look at certain use cases. So we would look at 3 use cases today. So overall, I'm expecting that we would take about half an hour from here. Yeah. So starting with what is broken. So when it comes to quality assurance, dare I say it, the compliance procedures that we have today are really demanding. They are complex, they are burdensome, they can be reactive. It's a lot. And rightfully so, because what we are dealing with here is drugs. Drugs are extremely critical to human health, and they're perhaps the riskiest item that can be manufactured. So when I say riskiest, it's pretty high risk on all 3 dimensions. If I talk about severity of harm, it can really cause extreme harmful effects for patients, if not done right. If I talk about probability of harm, there are a few 100 million people, taking these drugs every daily on a daily basis. And if I talk about detectability of harm, there is really no way to, figure out. So if I look at this pill today, and if I just, pop one out, I would have no idea what this pill contains, if it is safe or not, in terms of the detectability of harm. So probably the riskiest item we can manufacture is drugs. And what that has resulted into is that pharmaceutical industry today employs the largest percentage of people in the quality assurance teams. It's pretty much near the double digits. Uh, I think very closely followed by medical devices and then some of the other industries. The second challenge I want to highlight is around the best effort tools. So of course, as an industry, we have put the best effort tools that we can have. However, often, at the risk of just repeating what most of you already know, most of our data still resides on paper and spreadsheets. And as per some data I've put together, nearly 70% of the manufacturing data is never ever used. It does not see the light of the day. And talking about my final challenge that I want to highlight, that and of course, if you're not using data, then there is no insights that we are drawing from this data, and which is evident by the fact that if I look at 2019, nearly 24% of the warning letters, they had issues around inadequate investigations. So why can't I just investigate properly? Because I have no insights. uh, if something has gone wrong, we are just really trying to scratch our head. There are lots of methodology, but for whatever reason, the outcome has not come. It's very difficult to pinpoint whether the issues were in manufacturing, maybe in R&D itself, and based on a lot of the conversations which I keep on having on a routine basis. Probably a big victim is also a big culprit is also the poor design and development that we might have done. So with these challenges at hand, now let us look at what kind of systems of innovation we can put together when it comes to quality assurance. So what I'm showing you right now is something you might have seen a million times. It is our typical journey of reimagining quality assurance. It has various milestones divide into levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4. You might have seen an extremely similar slide many times, but what I want to put a different idea in front of all of you today is that we don't have to go through all the levels. So before I talk about that more, I just want to take an analogy that there's a whole generation of people who have never used a desktop. They directly went to using laptops, and there's a whole generation of coming now which might never even use a laptop. They are just starting and adopting the mobile devices like phones and tablets. Um, so the same or similar idea which I want to put in front of all of you today is that, and if there is one takeaway we can take out of this session, that would be that we don't have to necessarily go through all the levels. uh, the the journey doesn't have to be slow. We can directly leapfrog. We can skip level 1 and 2 and directly go to level 3, and the tools are available today. And this would pretty much be the focus of some of the next slides that are going to come up. Um, Now, if I have to put together a picture of quality assurance as a whole, a very good framework would be to start visualizing the manufacturing value chain itself. It has various steps, but I have highlighted 6 of them. Starting at the supplier quality management, then we have inward material testing. We have manufacturing process going from there on. After the batch has been manufactured, we have a very significant stage called product changeover. From there, we can go into releasing a batch release, and supporting all of this as a foundation is our quality management system. So just spending maybe a very brief amount of time on each one of them, and then focusing on some of them in the next slide. I'll just start with supplier quality management. Now, what we might have today, might be planning to have today, would be system of records. So if I talk about system of records for supply quality management, we do have periodic audits. These might have some risk-based approach incorporated, but they might be agnostic to any risk associated with the partner. Uh, Now, how a system of innovation might look like here is that I might have a continuous collaboration and audits which are based on risk, and some of that has already started happening really. Going to second stage, our inward material testing. So we receive materials based on our COAs, and we do the testing. We have certain tools like ERP and LIMS to manage all of this data together. So how do I go from this system of record to system of innovation? So we can go beyond testing, and we can pretty much release material based on a unified risk that we can assess associated with the material and the supplier. uh, you know it can become a reality. Some part of that has already being enabled pretty much. Now coming to the third stage, manufacturing process quality. So here, we have hybrid systems. We are using a mix of paper. We might be using some BMRs, MES kind of tools. Now, this is an area where we can leapfrog. We don't have to necessarily invest in the system of records. We can pretty much leapfrog into the system of innovation, which would be powered by machine learning. Our machines can be made intelligent. So imagine a machine having a brain and thinking about what should the CPPs be for, let's say, manufacturing a particular product, or in fact, one step before that, out of all the process parameters, which ones should be critical process parameters in the first place, right? So this is an area that we would touch upon as one of the use cases, and we'll see how this has become a reality, and we can pretty much leapfrog and have very quick and meaningful results. Uh, then moving on to the product changeover, one area which I want to highlight here is the inefficiencies around the cleaning process. It's a disaster. It can take a lot of time. It can lead to very frequent failures. In fact, I would talk a little bit more into details about that as well, and how we'll see that we don't have to have system of records which we might be using today, but directly we can leapfrog to an intelligent cleaning orchestrator, and we would look at how that can be done. And then coming to batch release, one of the blockers which would frequently happen in releasing a batch is, we would often have these critical investigations which might block us. How they can be resolved faster based on machine learning, we would look at an example of that as well. And finally, quality management system. So this is the bread and butter of our quality assurance teams. We spend a lot of time in managing changes, assessing risk, understanding the corrective and preventive actions. How do we mitigate risk using that? What kind of reportings do we want to enable for ourselves as well as the internal and external stakeholders? So we will look at how we can enhance the capability of the quality assurance teams in this area. So coming to the use cases now, the first one we want to talk about out of the three is how the process parameters can be optimized for manufacturing operation. So let's take an example of just one unit operation, and it might be, let's say I'm going to take an example of OSD line because that's the dominant piece of manufacturing. But the idea which I'm going to present pretty much applies to all the other dosage forms like injectable and even the upcoming ones, biologics, cell and gene therapy as well. Is that I can pick, let's say, one unit operation in this case, let's say a granulation operation or a compression machine, pretty much. And now looking at the process parameters that we are able to capture from this machine, we can pretty much optimize the process parameter for one particular unit operation. So we don't have to have an optimization across the line. We can pretty much optimize, let's say, a granulation operation. We can continuously monitor the impeller speed. We can continuously measure some of the critical quality attributes that we have selected. In case of compression, we can look at hardness as one of the CQAs. In terms of the process parameters, what is the compression force, right? So there are these singular unit operations, for an example, granulation, which can be optimized in itself. It doesn't have to interact with the other unit operations. It doesn't have to integrate with, let's say, your LIMS system or your ERP system to that extent. And because the optimized values are going to be within the range that has come to us from R&D, it may not even require validation. So pretty much it can be deployed in not more than 6 weeks, and we can instantly start having the optimized process parameters, which we can make use of, which we can feed into the machines, and that can pretty much not only optimize the yield, but it will definitely lead to the reduction of the deviations and subsequently the batch failures. So an outcome of this particular initiative would be that we would have fewer batch failures. Now extending this idea to my second subset of this same use case. Now imagine that I have a deviation. I would really want to have a very fast resolution, but also an accurate one, right? In order to release the batch faster. And if I can really pinpoint, if I can really find out the deviation in an accurate manner, I can take better preventive actions. My future deviations would become fewer. My deviation recurrence rate would go down. And this is something that can be achieved by a very, very simple analysis, as basic as correlation analysis, and as going maybe one stage in the advanced, using some of the classification methods, using machine learning's algorithms. So as a summary, the idea which I want to propagate today is that uh, we can start with one unit operation. We can optimize it. We can look at the compliance status of this unit operation. We can start optimizing the yield that comes out of it, and then it can be gradually scaled to other unit operations, and then arriving at a vision of plant-wide optimization as well. So this was the first use case. Now moving forward to the second use case, which is more about product changeover, and this is where we touch upon the some of the challenges that we have seen around cleaning. So just to give you some data point before I move forward. So in year 2019, if you look at the FDA compliance actions, and by that I mean 483 letters. Nearly 34% of the warning letters did have some or the other issue related to the cleaning or the cross contamination. So this is an area which has become very, very critical in the last couple of years, often leading to not only compliance issues, but also just dramatically reducing down the efficiency in the product changeover, having a huge impact on the efficiency of the plant itself. And something that can be solved readily with some of the some of the work I'm going to show you today. So there are 4 ideas I want to present as part of the optimization or the in the process of making the cleaning process more robust as well as compliant. The first thing I want to touch upon is new drug simulation. So in pharmaceutical industry, we keep on having new drug introductions, even not for commercial purposes, but for exhibit purposes. And if we are in a CMO sort of environment, then this is something that we do on a weekly basis, if not daily. So having an idea of the risks associated with a new drug in terms of the impact it can have, on the cross contamination levels of the other products being manufactured in the facility, that can really enable us to make some smart decisions. So for example, if I have a new drug which is pretty high risk, I would not want to introduce that drug in a facility which is lower risk, because then the net risk of my low risk facility would go up, and I would have to invest in increasing the proportional controls, technical and organizational controls for the low risk facility, and that can lead to not only delays but as well as efficiencies around the cost values. And this simulation of the new drug risk in terms of cross contamination can pretty much be done based on the similarity of the drugs which we have already manufactured in the past, based on the critical process parameters of the cleaning process in terms of the temperature, concentration, etc. Pretty achievable goal, something that has become a reality. The second thing I want to talk about is, obviously, we should automate all the non-value added tasks. Like, we do generate lots of reports, documentations for our protocol execution, scheduling, and all of that should be automated to the extent that everybody knows, starting from quality assurance going to production, that what do we do next, when do we do it, and how exactly to do it. If we have a visibility of what, when, and how, this is where the magic happens. This is where the procedural non-compliance can be eliminated, and that number which I was talking about earlier, 34% of the issues being related to cross contamination, that can be dramatically cut down if we can take away these procedural challenges. And it pretty much goes back to my first challenge when I said that the procedures can be very demanding, but rightfully so. So talking about the third key ideas within this is reduction in the cleaning failures itself. So our cleaning procedures on the shop floor can be very complex. It can go anywhere between 4 to 6 hours to even 18 to 24 hours at time. if the things go in a normal manner. If there are some breakdowns, some issues, it can be even longer. So now imagine this, that there's an operator or maybe a group of operator which are going to clean a very complex piece of equipment. It has maybe 10 to 12 stages, maybe 100 to 200 subtasks within these stages. Having an intelligence around what has gone wrong in the past, what is the probability of something going wrong in this particular step, and having an insight in terms of the recommendation can go a long way into proactively alerting the operator that perhaps you may want to pay attention to those corners which were missed last time by your fellow operators or maybe by yourself. Having the visibility around some of the equipments that might be turning older, that maybe we need to kind of tweak some parameters in our cleaning process now, and not only restricted to the cleaning process, going to the sampling process as well. Perhaps we are seeing certain microbial failures because the hold times are crossing the limits. So having that sort of intelligence available at the fingertips can really make the entire operation extremely proactive and cut the failures down when it comes to cleaning, and have a very positive impact on reducing the product changeover times, as well as, of course, making the entire compliance very robust. Now, this might sound an easy thing to do, but when we actually start doing it, we would come to know that any typical pharmaceutical drug manufacturing facility might which produces, let's say, 100 to 300 products, maybe has a few hundred equipments, maybe 30 to 40 operators. If I keep on going into the contributing factors, it can come near 100 million combinations as well. And crunching those 100 million combinations in real time, it's not humanly possible. It's not possible by some of the basic analytics that we have freely available today. We do have to employ certain advanced algorithms which are pretty easy to use but can give dramatic results, and in a very accurate manner as well. Again, none of this requires any elaborate validation, because this is pretty much an insight system. And finally, touching upon the fourth pillar, which is performing risk-based sampling at the changeovers. So after every changeover, we do have to take certain samples. What if we could completely eliminate those samples? What if we could clear the batches by just visual inspection, right? Or what if we could have some sort of statistical analysis in place based on risk and historical data, that perhaps at this point of time we do not really need a sample to be taken because of reasons XYZ. That can dramatically improve the outcomes that we are looking to achieve at this particular juncture. So I would stop it here. Obviously, I could go on and spend another hour on this, but we would move on to the third and very, very critical and very interesting use case which I'm going to talk about now, is how can we use AI to enhance capability and really reducing the known value adding work for our quality assurance teams. So if I go back maybe 20-25 years, the tools that we had available were pretty much calculators, papers, some basic computing, Excel sheets. Now, if I come forward, in 2020, has that really changed? I wouldn't think so. There are some linear changes, but we have started manufacturing 21st century molecules. We have started somewhat exploring 21st century machines as well. But do we have 21st century tools available to our QA teams in a democratic fashion to be able to make use of them and make the life simpler, make everything more seamless and intelligent? The answer would be a straight no. And somewhere there's a friction to adopt these technologies. So something that we have to overcome from the top. But having said that, coming to the use case itself. Now we all know that we do spend a lot of time in managing changes. We do have systems like QMS, LIMS, ERP, a lot of data might only be paper and spreadsheets. So, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, we are performing, we are looking at certain deviations and their root causes. We are trying to, devise effective corrective and preventive actions. And, once implemented, we are also trying to assess their effectiveness, right? Otherwise, there's a deviation which can reoccur, and the whole effort can be wasted. So how do we kind of, make everything more seamless and more efficient? Uh, so bringing learnings from all the disparate systems together, and this is what I'm going to talk about as a first pillar, would be having a search like capability where I could instantly search across systems, and not just systems, but if I'm, let's say, from corporate team, if I'm responsible to manage multiple sites, I could have comparative a query of data, which can be done very easily. So querying data seems like a simple job, but when there is a lot of sources, lot of disparate systems, it can become pretty hectic. It can take hours to days to get certain meaningful reports. And we all have seen that how we pretty much spend a lot of hours in just gathering data, putting them together, and making some reports. All of that could be pretty much taken out, and hence non-value adding work could be eliminated. Having cluster browsers across sites and understanding the comparisons across several sites based on certain semantics models is something that can also be enabled. The third pillar I would want to talk about is having an assistance around the root cause analysis. So if something has happened, can I say that there's 80% probability that this is the root cause, but there's also a 60% probability that there might be another root cause. So now from searching in the dark, I have some idea, some starting points, and perhaps I can close my investigations faster and in a more intelligent manner as well. So I would stop here. I'm about to reach my time limit. So just coming to the summary of it all. So the key takeaways I would want to just revise here is that we do have to leapfrog to the system of innovations. We don't have to wait for 2 years, 2.5 years to go from that painful journey of level 1, then level 2, having data acquisitions and then putting some automation together. uh, you know Especially when today the industry has the capability, and I think also has all the right reasons in the COVID context to really leapfrog to some of the system of innovations. Um, and the second key takeaway I would want to just discuss here, that we have to work with agile players if you want to see some rapid outcomes. Some of the traditional approaches, um, we have to say them goodbye. If we want to see some rapid outcomes, we may have to think outside the box a little bit. And finally, we have to use AI to enhance capability of the QA teams. We have to give them these capabilities, in a democratic manner. And people are pretty capable to kind of, self-train themselves. There's a lot of help out there today, but there is no reason why in the 21st century we should be using the tools which are not so advanced. So thank you very much. I would be very happy to talk into more details about any of these topics when we are
Vivek,
towards the end. Yeah, thank you,
Vivek,
Rajesh.
thanks so much. One question coming out of curiosity for people. You spoke a lot about machine learning being integral to all this systems of innovation. So people are used to the traditional, say, quality management system, a LIMS, an ERP, or whatever. So they are wondering how ML works, what will it pick up from where, how does it essentially do the smart work that it does,
Yeah.
and enable people, enable the QA teams, as an example that you have on the slide that is showing right now. So a little bit more light on what does it take for someone to actually realize this if they call you tomorrow and say, hey, I want to get all these benefits of machine learning. Explain to me how you will do it for me in my setup.
Yeah, so having some of these systems can actually be extremely useful. So let's take an example. Let's say we are trying to investigate, an OS that has come in a batch. Um, so we may have certain hypotheses, and I'm kind of eliminating the human error out of all of it. So when it comes to doing an investigation of, let's say, an OS in a batch, what all kind of data do we need? So we do need to look at who are the suppliers of the starting materials, right? Um, Perhaps it's possible that the issue might be related to one of the materials, and somewhere in one of my slides I had shown, just look at the second screen where there's a correlation analysis that has been done, which is showing that the final impurity has a very strong correlation with an impurity profile in one of the starting materials. And it might be the case that it is closely associated with, let's say, one particular supplier. Uh, Going one step forward, it is possible that the issue might have been around the process parameters of the equipment, a data which we can pick up from a system like SAP, or if we have something like an MES in place. But even without that, it is possible. So having a correlation between some of the ranges of process parameter, and the process parameter might still be within our upper and lower specification limits, but it's possible that it is near the edge, so we might have to narrow down our specification ranges. So having that correlation, let's say, between a final impurity and some of the process parameters, so we can make use of the ERP system that we have in place. And finally, it's possible that the issue might be with some a particular training associated with an operator. So we may have a new operator, the trainings might not be complete, the competency score might be around on the lower side, right? So there are all these factors which can play a role into all of these factors which go into a batch. And there's no limit to what all can go wrong, but there are some usual suspects. Now, without having some sort of automated insights, essentially I'm repeating the same thing. And what I'm learning, as a human being, that if I look at a similar kind of deviation next time, it depends on my experience. If I'm an experienced quality assurance person, then I might do a job faster. So the way our brain evolves with the historical context, the way those neural connections form in our brain, in the same way, some of these algorithms can form those strong connections and put the usual suspect information in front of you by continuously learning and evolving, looking at the data. So I hope, Rajesh, that throws some light on how this can start becoming very useful from day one.
So related to that, Vivek,
Yeah.
the question on the use of ML for root cause analysis, is it just at a concept stage, or have you actually done this anywhere?
So it is not at a concept stage anymore. We have done it with the top 5 pharma company in India, and in fact, the data which I'm showing you, the screens which I'm showing you, are pretty much the part of the solution that we have figured out. One of the advantages we did have, though, in this case, that we did have the availability of data from day zero. So it took us maybe a few weeks to get to this outcome, but in some of the other cases it can pretty much go to, let's say, 8 weeks or so. But it is not at the concept stage anymore. There are, I would say, I know at least double-digit companies across the globe who are already leveraging these kind of technologies.
Thanks, Vivek. There is one question on how to deal with the data which is not easy to process because they are not in a standard form. How about creating this whole standardized algorithms, etc.? That is not specifically an issue just for QA. That's an
Yeah.
issue across the enterprise, and we deal with that day in and day out. The whole process of right from looking at the maturity of an organization and then deciding what are the steps that the organization needs to go through before they are able to get to a level of maturity to use AI, to use ML. There are some deliberate process steps that one needs to go through. And if one were to recall the initial few slides I showed, this is where the operational data strategy and technical data strategy became important in forming that fundamental, so that different functions such as QA in the example that Vivek spoke about is able to reap the benefits of that. I don't know, Vivek, if you have anything else to add, but the specific question on how do you work with non-standardized database?
So I would just add that this is a solved problem. This is not a problem which we have to solve anymore.
True.
Right. So we should not reinvent the wheel here and just make use of what we have already solved. And there are brilliant solutions out there for putting all this data from unstructured to in a correlated, structured manner.
Correct. Thanks, Vivek. We can continue to take questions on the chat window. Sudakshana, if I can request you to probably take another 20 minutes or so to cover how an enabled organization can be very effective at using everything that Sebastian and Vivek spoke about.
Sure, Rajesh. Can you see is my screen visible?
You and your screen both are visible.
Okay. So yes, so just quickly put it into presentation. Yes. So this is the final session that we have for today, and we are taking a little bit of a different view from a very hard skill oriented look at solving for the future of the pharma industry. We are looking at putting in place some horizontal processes that will serve, and these processes will serve as as the framework for creating the org of the future. And we will share a few insights that we have on this, and we will also talk a little bit about what SAP offers in terms of managing talent and managing learning end to end. From creating the from nurturing the right people to ensuring that they have the right skills to lead the organizations towards the future. So when we started thinking about this, in terms of what would be the key messages that we need to focus on, we wanted to start by looking at some of the essential building blocks for which we leveraged the work that BCG has done in terms of painting the vision for the future of the pharmaceutical industry. And here, even before I go into what technology needs to enable, let us talk about where these needs, what are the drivers within the pharma industry that is sort of necessitating the interventions that technology can enable, right? So some of the new capabilities that we need to have within the workforce for the pharma industry include digital readiness, both from business continuity perspective and also from the fact that remote working is becoming more and more the norm, right? So how can we quickly upskill our existing workforce or hire a new workforce that is more suited to working in this digital and remote working environment? Also, when AI and ML driven processes become more the norm, how to really leverage this to drive end-to-end decision, to drive key decisions while I'm running my QC process or while I'm running my QA process. How do I quickly utilize the insights that are providing by the system to help me do my work better? Right, so there comes all these areas around human-centered design, right? How can we make this process as seamless as possible, right? And also, as more and more automation becomes the norm, again driven by remote working and more digital environment, human machine interfaces and how can the workforce be more and more comfortable in dealing with this becomes more and more important, right? Similarly, we are looking at, as and when we are looking at this, we are looking at what are the learning programs that we can roll out, which include, say, augmented reality or virtual reality for QC analysts, right? Whether it is in terms of, helping them make sense of the quality results, or delivering personalized work instructions to them. As I mentioned, data-driven decision making. So these are again certain things that become absolutely important in terms of creating the work of the future. Also, multimodal learning in terms of any device, anywhere, on-demand learning rather than just a classroom and instructor-led format is also becoming the norm. In addition, compliance is a very important element for this industry, whether it is in terms of employee health and safety measures or in terms of really adhering to global good manufacturing practices or quality practices, right? So these are all evolving areas for which there has to be an ongoing learning which is suited to these realities of digital, remote, human-machine interfaces and human-centered design. Right. Also, in addition, organizations are also will have to be redesigned to bring in some new roles or redesigning existing roles, and KPIs also have to be realigned in line with some of these new normal that is emerging. Right. And of course, to make learning most effective, we have to deliver best-in-class experience so that there is pull for the learning programs, and also automate nudges so that the existing workforce can be upskilled in keeping with the requirements of the business. Right. Ongoing change management through communication and through better collaboration through peer-to-peer networks, of course, is also another essential element. So based on based on the work that has been done by BCG, we have been able to arrive at these 5 key building blocks of the org of the future. Now let us look at when we look at the workforce of the future, what are some of the key enablers through technology, right? So on one hand, we are looking at areas such as intelligent hiring, right? So to enable the sourcing of workforce with the right skill sets, right? Then we are also looking at how can we onboard these employees faster and deploy them faster, right? So if we can put in place things such as virtual reality enabled lab view or manufacturing plant view, then we can actually not only just hire faster, but also we can enable these resources faster so that they can start delivering as per the new requirements of the business. In addition, training and upskilling is going to be an absolute mandatory requirement going forward, as we are looking at doing remote QA or QC, or looking at regulatory filings in a remote manner, doing audits remotely, or maybe stricter norms, reduced timeline for doing some of this. So for that, validated learning, compliant learning is always going to be a key technology need. In addition, to drive more efficiency and effectiveness in operations, ability to deploy, schedule manpower based on the right skills and their availability is going to be absolutely essential. So this is again something that technology will enable, right? And all of this, for this, we require we need to plan manpower based on the future skills requirement, right? So ongoing workforce manpower planning and analytics is going to be essential. Right. So what does a total workforce management platform entail, right? A total workforce management platform actually enables all of these things, right? So starting from recruiting to employee onboarding to enabling learning to managing performance and goals, and then managing compensation, and then managing succession and development, right? So these are the essential elements. All of this is driven by competencies, skills, and system enable best practices. A few other areas that are driven by, sort of an end-to-end talent management application, which, we are not talking about today, but just for a quick understanding, things like payroll, time and attendance recording, benefits administration, organization structure, employee master record. So these are all part of the same integrated platform, and the talent management capabilities and the learning management capabilities and the workforce analytics, workforce planning, etc., that we are talking about are just capabilities that are built on the same platform. So referring to some of the points that Rajesh mentioned earlier, the importance of data and to manage data in such a way that it is also the basis of my transactions, it drives my decision making, and it drives innovation. All of these things are managed leveraging the data that is the single source of truth that is part of such a platform, right? And some of the new age capabilities such as social collaboration, mobile-based access to the application, and intelligence that is very so normally and nicely built into the platform that you don't have to really plan for it separately, right? So those are capabilities of such a best-in-class end-to-end talent management platform. So let us focus a little bit more on learning today, especially in the context of the org of the future. So some of the key elements that we are looking at when we talk about transforming enterprise learning, especially in the pharma context, we talk about, of course, compliance is going to be more and more driven through such a system, and it is going to be, it should be such that it enables some of these requirements that are coming up. For example, the experience management part is very important. What does experience management mean from a learning perspective? We need to offer learning programs that are personalized, that can be delivered through a centralized control manner, whether it is in the form of tracking the completion records or managing the content. While doing that, it also needs to be intuitive so that employees can consume this very easily, and it supports overall talent development and talent management and employee growth from a professional perspective. Second key pillar of this is capability driven learning. So it all stems from the manpower planning part. What are the skill sets that are available today? What are the key gaps? And hence, what do we need to do to bridge those gaps? Do we need to hire intelligently the right skill sets from the market if it is available? Or if that is more time consuming, then how can we upskill the people who are part of my organization today quickly through guided learning plans to drive an accelerated upskilling, reskilling program? And all of this learning is being enabled through virtual learning or digital remote working mode. Continuous learning is also something that is another pillar. Continuous learning. So again, this is learning agility, which means that at any point of time, the learning programs based on the skill gaps or the identified learning paths should be available to upskill and develop new employees, right? And personalized learning is context-sensitive learning that employees can consume at the point of need, right? And here it's an interesting statistic that we share here, that 10% of all learning is planned today, 90% is spontaneous and on the job. Right, so if I look at an end-to-end enterprise learning management platform, it starts at the it enables this entire value chain, which is like, I plan based on my skill strategy. Once I've identified the gaps, then I design programs, which can be curricular driven, or it can just be programs put together to address existing skill gaps. Then I deliver these programs based on content that either I'm creating internally or I'm sourcing from multiple different sources, but I'm making those available either part of a curricula or either part of these programs that have been put together for quick upskilling or reskilling. Then I continuously measure and improve, and then it becomes, and all of this actually contributes to profitable growth of my organization. So this is the entire end-to-end value chain as we see it from an enterprise learning perspective. At the very core, there is a learning management system which is, which, as I mentioned, it is built on, on the basic enterprise employee data, their skill data, based on which I do an assessment of what the learning needs are going to be based on a employee's job role, or based on the career path for that employee. For example, a QC personnel vis-a-vis a QA analyst, vis-a-vis somebody who is operating a highly automated machine on the shop floor, will probably have very different learning paths. However, from a compliance perspective, they must all be aware of GXP practices or QXP practices, or they must be aware of FDA 21 or CFR Part 11 guidelines, right? So these are kind of things that should be managed through these learning paths or learning management system. A learning management system is also a transactional system where your learning records are kept. All the learning assets inventory is managed through this. Sort of defined learning paths, right, are maintained in these systems, and this is a system through which your reports and dashboards can be generated. So this is basically the foundation. On top of that, there should be a contents management capability through which, whether if you want to quickly roll out remote learning, remote learning programs, right? Or you want to quickly, you want to roll out a program through which you can upskill, provide some digital engagement skills to your, say, the commercial staff or the field staff. Right. So some of this for which you can source content from so many different sources that are actually available. Right. You can source the content, you can store the content. Some of this content may be premium content, so you have to manage the licensing of that content. So all of this is again part of the the content management strategy. All of this should be part of the content management platform capabilities. Right. And also this can be sort of a marketplace where employees can come and they can access any course that they want to learn on demand. And the SAP solution actually has got a lot of partnership with a lot of such organizations, universities, etc., that provide these sort of micro learning courses, right, which can be accessed on demand through this same platform that is part of this end-to-end learning management suite. Right. Also, in addition, with this company called Skillsoft, we have a very strong partnership through which we are also making a whole host of curated content and learning paths available to different types of organizations to cater to this new learning requirements that are emerging, whether it is in terms of engaging with customers digitally, or remote working best practices, or doing audit remotely, or doing service or managing service related requirements digitally. So those sort of emerging requirements in the current context of remote work and this overnight transition to digital is something that is being enabled through this, right? And essentially it is delivering three key business related needs, right? One is, of course, compliance training is being catered to, as I mentioned, whether it is FDA 21, CFR Part 11, or ISO, or sustainability standards, or quality processes, or global manufacturing best practices. So these are being catered to through this platform. End-to-end talent development, so learning and skills verification across the employee life cycle, career path, and development goals, right? So this end-to-end talent development part is also being enabled and supported by this end-to-end learning management platform. And we are catering to the needs of a single platform that is catering to the needs of the entire workforce, whether it is people I have on my payrolls, or this is a set of temporary workforce or contingent workforce that are also a huge part of the workforce that is actually deployed on the shop floor. So it takes care of both of this, right? And so it's completely integrated. There is no difference in terms of, the learning path, the guided learning path that you would provide to your own employees vis-a-vis workforce that is contingent, right? So those are some of the key differentiators. So again, full access to the same source of employee master data, organizational master data, employee skills data, qualification level, etc. Built-in collaboration capabilities, analytics, and mobile-based access. A strong content management capability delivered through this content management. One is the content management capability, and the other is the partnerships that we have with various organizations who are providing this tailored content, right? So these are all the differentiating capabilities that any modern enterprise learning platform should have, right? So going forward, Yeah, so in the next, couple of minutes, we just wanted to share how the system looks, right? It is too short a timeline to actually show a demo for this, but we quickly actually wanted to show, so it's a very user-friendly screen where as an individual learner, you are given access to, your own learning paths, right? Which are unique, which are relevant to you based on the skill gaps that have been identified for you and the learning path that has been personalized for you. Also, the content is, as I mentioned, is pulled seamlessly from all these various sources, and it is made available to the learner on the single platform, right? And in addition, for the on-demand learning part, which is basically the learning marketplace, we have partnerships with many different organizations. Some of them are startups who are very agile in terms of some of the capabilities that they are providing, but all of this are made available to the learner using a single point through which all of this can be accessed, right? So in addition, there's a lot of collaborative capability that is already built in because we actually have seen a lot of business benefits that result from peer-to-peer collaboration. So enabling learning rooms, learning communities, getting access to mentors and coaches, getting ad hoc experts and expertise when you are stuck with a particular problem. So all of this can actually enable through this collaborative learning environment, which is also part of the same end-to-end talent management platform. As you can see, the look and feel is very consistent, and it is, again, you can access all of it through the same one single point of access. Actionable insights and analytics, as I mentioned, all of this, the skill gap analysis, the discovery of, in terms of what will be the learning needs and upskilling needs, all of this is driven through a lot of, inbuilt manpower planning, workforce analytics capabilities, a lot of reports and analytics, including lots of metrics and KPIs that deliver out of the box. Also, we are enhancing and strengthening the peer benchmarking capabilities. So for example, what is your organization's skill gap level versus your peers, right? So those sort of recommendations also can be generated through the same tool, which is going to help you in making the right decisions and for your employee base. Another very important element, and this is referred multiple times in the BCG's future of work recommendations, which is being enabling the workforce, especially on the shop floor, in the labs through VR and AR. So this is not futuristic. Technology is already enabled today to actually deliver all of this, and we are working with a lot of customers already in India today to actually deliver training content through the virtual reality mode. While a lot of this is being done today to enable asset maintenance, especially in remote locations, but more and more companies are actually leveraging this for delivering maintenance to train personnel for very high skilled work. And the pharma industry and the kind of learning needs for the pharma industry are very well suited for training programs that are actually delivered leveraging these AR and VR tools. And a lot of ML and AI is already inbuilt into this platform. So, AI-based coaching and digital feedback is part of the entire learner journey. And this is already available and built into the platform today. You can just start to leverage it. Similarly, gamification and recognition through points and awards, etc. All of this are again part of the platform. We just wanted to show you how nice and pleasing the user interface really looks. Right. And then finally, compliance is, of course, very important for the pharma industry. So whether it is in terms of EHS tracking or, the other FDA sort of compliance related trainings, which need to be done on a regular basis in terms of refreshing, certification, recertification, etc. So all of that is also managed through a specific industry focused capability that is delivered by SAP. And this is adopted by a large number of pharma companies, both in India and globally. As we already spoke about this, I'll not. But as you can see, the industry-specific compliance capabilities will be part of the same, learning plan, the learner-specific learning plan that is actually displayed to each and every person when they log into the system. And then finally, I wanted to share a few customer stories just to show that this is not just on paper. The business benefits are highly realizable. So whether it is SAP increasing employee engagement, or John Deere, as I was mentioning, through AR VR being able to significantly enhance the productivity of the dealers, distributors, or a mining company for whom sustainability and employee safety, etc., is again a big driver. A banking, where again compliance is a very important requirement. Vetter is again up and coming pharma company where they are actually leveraging the platform to deliver validated learning programs. So these are just some customer examples which we wanted to share with you as well before ending. So in summary, as I have been talking about it, let an intelligent platform do the job of building the organization of the future for you through blended learning plans, which are both structured, and programs which are largely unstructured and more event-based, self-paced, topical, and time-based sort of programs. So with that, I would like to hand it over back to you, Rajesh.